welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're making a bag that's going to blow your mind. I mean, it blew my mind, which is not that shocking, honestly, because every bag blows my mind. Today, we are making the Vekza bowler bag from Country Cow Designs. Now, I gotta be completely honest, I don't have my bag vocabulary down. So when you say bowler bag, I have no idea what that means. I just think that's a name you gave it. Apparently a bowler bag is a very specific type of bag. It's a design, and that's what we're making today. It's a rounded bag. Let me show it to you before you make any judgments on whether or not you're gonna make this pattern, okay? So here is the bag that I made to test out this pattern, and holy guacamole, guys, this bag is stunning. First of all, let's talk about the materials that I used, okay? I used this fantastic vinyl. This vinyl has like a wave to it. I don't know if you can see the texture on this vinyl. It's amazing though. It's stiff and it's beefy. I don't know. I want to say I would not suggest using it again for this bag, but come on, look how amazing this is. So if you're more experienced, definitely beef up that vinyl, use that waterproof canvas, go nuts. And then for the front pocket, I used quilt cotton. For the top, I used quilt cotton. And when I say quilt cotton, I mean like cotton woven, just regular cotton fabric that you would find at any store. And then the bottom has the vinyl as well with some little feet down there. So first we have this front curvy pocket, which I know some of you guys are like, oh no, not the curves. Yes, you're gonna be fine. It has a double zip opening, which I just love. There we go, nice and simple. So we've got the front pocket. We don't have anything on the back. I'll show you, we just have this beautiful detailing on the back with our straps. Isn't that fun? She does include an option to have D-rings on the side or some sort of a strap connector on the side. I chose these incredible like faux D-rings. I don't even know what these are called. They have a straight edge on the bottom and then they have a hole on the top for you to connect your swivel hooks. When we open up the bag, we have a zipper pocket and then also a slip pocket on the other side. You may also notice we've got binding. Yep, we've got some binding. I know, stop. Don't go yet. Don't go yet. Stop, okay? When I do binding, I use waterproof canvas binding, a 1-inch strip. I'm telling you, you don't have to spend all this time ironing and folding and ironing and folding and then stretching and trying. Waterproof canvas. Just let me show you how I do it, okay? Just watch the tutorial. If you need to, just go straight there, use the timestamps, find the binding, and just watch. It's very simple. You can do it. I believe in you. You can do it. So this is a very structured bag. I want to tell you, in the pattern, she actually mentions that binding is like the skeleton of a bag. It's what gives it structure, and that is true. This is very, very structured. Now, yes, I did use firmer material. I used a vinyl and I used waterproof canvas, which is going to add to the structure. So in today's tutorial, we're going to try it with quilt cotton and then a little bit of waterproof canvas for the exterior, but none in the lining. We're just gonna use a little bit of waterproof canvas on the places where I used a vinyl here. We're gonna use waterproof canvas. Everywhere else, though, is going to be just cotton woven, loosey-goosey material. So it seems like when she designed this bag, she had the intention of it just having the shoulder straps, and then she knew so many of you were gonna want a crossbody strap, so she added that to the pattern. And let me just show you this crossbody strap for a minute, guys. Look at this. I love how she does this. See, on one side, we have the beautiful fabric. On the other side, just some waterproof canvas. It's just, I mean, isn't that beautiful? I just love that. So we're gonna add that on to our little pineapple cups down here. Hello, isn't that cute? I love it. You know what I need to do? I need to add a couple of rivets right here. That's what we need. We need a rivet right here to hold this in place better. We'll do that in the tutorial today. We'll add rivets down there. All right, there we go. Now it has the crossbody strap. So let me go get my little step stool and we'll see what this looks like on. Okay, so you can kind of tell by that. So first, let me show you what it looks like with just the shoulder strap. So this is a shoulder strap like this, right? So it comes down right around the middle of my hip. It hangs really nicely. I did go for a rolled shoulder strap. There are a couple different options in the pattern. We'll talk about that soon. If you wanted to, you could definitely make these straps shorter so that it was more of a elbow bag. But I do feel like it's a bigger bag. It's not like a really tiny bag that you would want as an elbow bag. So I do think the sizes of these straps are perfect to behold just like that. I mean, look at that. And it's comfortable. It's not too big. I don't feel like I'm like a mule walking around, you know, like it still feels nice and slim, but it's big enough to hold everything. I love that. Okay, so now let's try it with the crossbody strap. Here we go. So now, you know, on my length, I have it more like butt length. If I go across the body, fix the hair. There we go. So now this is what it looks like crossbody. So this would be a really good college bag, actually. This would be fantastic for a university student, a high school student. You could put your folders in here. Let me go see if I have a folder. Hold on. Hold on. Okay, so besides my wallet and like cell phone and keys, these are some things I would carry around with me all the time. So this is just my iPad. This is just a spiral notebook and then like a sketch pad. These are things I would always have with me. So let's see if that fits in here. Oh yeah, perfect. Perfect, actually. It's like the absolute perfect fit. You see that? You see how it all goes in just like that? And then we can zip it up. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. So this would be a great bag for, like I said, college students. Again, not putting a bunch of big textbooks in this. I'm talking you're going to one class, you've got your textbook or whatever, you have your notebook. You don't need a whole lot of stuff normally when you're going to different classes in university, depending on the class. We're not going to get into it, okay? But if you're just carrying a small amount of things, this would be perfect for a college student. Obviously, this would be perfect for all of us every day. And yes, I do believe, especially, let me think. I know some of you are going to ask if this would be a good gender-neutral bag for like a men's work bag. And I want to say yes, but I'm not sure about the straps. I mean, the straps are cool though. I think you could definitely, I mean, depending on the material you use, you know, like a nice dark brown leather or faux leather vinyl, that would be really cool. You could also just leave off these straps if you wanted to, and it would be just kind of like a bowler-shaped crossbody. So I do think you could make this bag for anybody. Honestly, I know plenty of men who would love to carry the bag just like this, but I understand where some of you guys are coming from. So thank you so much to Country Cow Designs for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. I've been so excited to share this bag with all of you. I absolutely love this design. We all love Country Cow Designs patterns. You can see they're some of the most popular ones we see out there on the social medias. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. I'm going to have timestamps for every single part of this video. It's going to be a long one because there's a lot of steps, and you know I want to tell you about all of them, okay? So if there's just one part of the video you're interested in, check out those timestamps. They're going to be showing up right along the bottom edge of this video. Also, if you go and you expand the description of the video, all of the timestamps will be listed there as well. All right, let's get started. So to get started, you're going to need 2/3 of a yard for your exterior. Now I'm going to mix this up with a little bit of quilt weight cotton. So this is just a cotton woven. This is just going to be for the pocket and that little accent along the top of the bag. But then the main part of my exterior is going to be this waterproof canvas. Now waterproof canvas is a little bit stiffer and thicker than, you know, a quilt cotton, but it's not as thick as a vinyl or even a cork really. So I think this is going to work well for our exterior. For your lining, you're going to need 3/4 of a yard. I am just going to be using this quilt cotton today. So every single piece of fabric that is a quilt weight cotton or a cotton lycra, anything that can fray or has any bit of stretch at all to it, you're going to want to add some woven interfacing. I'm using the Pellon Shape Flex for that today. You're going to need about 1.5 yards of this. You're also going to need about 2/3 of a yard of the foam sew-in interfacing. Now I'm using the Soft and Stable from Biani. This is going to give the structure of the bag. Now you could use Decoville Light instead of this if you'd like. It will make it less squishy and just more, you know, kind of a firm. It gives it about the same firmness, the same structure, but it will just be less bulk in the seam. So if you want to use Decoville Light, go ahead and use that, or you can use the sew-in foam. And then we just need a small cut of fusible fleece for the front pocket. So here's a bunch of the hardware we'll be using today. You're going to be using 3 zippers. One zipper will be 26 inches long, another will be 18 inches long, and the final will be 10 inches long. 2 of the zippers, the 2 longer ones, are going to have 2 zipper pulls each. So I have a total here of 5 zipper pulls. Now I'm using zipper tape. This is number 5 zipper tape. These little coils on here are plastic, so I can sew over them. I'll be using that for all 3 pockets. However, if you'd like to use a smaller, skinnier zipper tape, like a number 3 zipper, you can definitely use that for the lining. I will be adding some little purse feet to the bottom, so here are my purse feet. I'll also be using rivets today. Crossbody strap is completely optional, but if you are going to be making one, you're going to need 2 D-rings. Now in the pattern, she actually uses these very large grommets, which is a really, really cool look. I will be using D-rings because it's what I have on hand. These are both 1-inch D-rings, and then a 1-inch slider, and 2 1-inch swivel hooks. Again, crossbody strap is totally optional. Another little addition that I'm still not sure I'm going to use or not, these are little strap ends. So these just kind of hug around the raw edges of a strap. I'm thinking about using them on these short handles, but I'm not completely set. But I wanted to show you in case we do decide to use these. These are 1-inch long strap ends. And then you're going to need 4 1-inch rectangle rings. I have my bag tag here. And then I will be making the rolled handles for the handbag. Now this is completely optional. You can make flat handles, but if you want to use the rolled handles, you're going to need some piping filler. So this is 1/8 of an inch cotton piping. Now you can use a thicker one. I think in the pattern she does. Yeah, in the pattern she suggests a slightly thicker one than this. She suggests a 3/16 of an inch, but this 1/8 of an inch will work just fine. We will also be making our own double fold binding today. Because I'm using quilt cotton for the lining, we will have to make it out of quilt cotton. If you're using waterproof canvas for your lining, it is a much easier binding. It's a 1-inch strip. I'll link a video where I go over that down in the description of this video. Okay, here's a bunch of the other stuff. I like to use a lot of tape. These are very, very sticky leather-like tapes. I would do my best to not sew over these. I use these more when I'm using a lot of waterproof canvas, especially for straps and things like that, so this is optional. I also have just some regular masking tape to help hold things together. I have a seam ripper and stiletto here, a healthy amount of clips. For my top thread today, I'll be using the Mara 70 weight, and for the bobbin thread, I'll be using the Mara 100 weight. I will be interchanging between needles. For the most part, I'll be using a Microtex 8012, but I'll also bump it up to a 9014 when I get to some really thick seams that I get a little worried my 8012 might break on. My 1-inch by 6-inch ruler is always with me. It's super handy. For marking tools, I like to use a chalk marker, a heat erasing marker, a pen, and a vinyl marker. I probably won't be using this one actually today because I don't think I have any vinyl. And then I always have my Beacon 3-in-1 glue. This is really helpful for installing hardware and covering up things. Alrighty, let's get started with the pattern pieces. First, we have pattern piece A. This is just one cut. This is exterior fabric. This is going to go around the top of the front pocket. So I have a cut of waterproof canvas here. I don't have this interfaced with anything because it is nice and thick and it will not stretch. If you're using quilt cotton on any of these pieces, you will need to interface them with your woven interfacing. From pattern piece B, we have an exterior cut of fabric. This is going to be that cute little pocket on the front. You're going to also want 2 cuts of lining fabric. All 3 of these are interfaced with my Shape Flex. And then a cut of fusible fleece. Pattern piece C is your exterior fabric. So this is going to be just a very little skinny trim on the bottom of the bag. I have 2 cuts of my waterproof canvas. Pattern piece D is going to be the exterior back. So this is just one big cut. I'm using my waterproof canvas. Pattern piece E are your handle connectors and also your crossbody connectors if you want to use those. So if you're not doing a crossbody strap, you're just going to have 2 cuts of this. If you are doing a crossbody strap, you're going to have 4 cuts of this. Pattern piece F are the long handles. These are going to go along the back panel right here. You're going to need 2 cuts of your exterior fabric for that. And then pattern piece G is that little strip that goes along the top of the bag. I like to kind of mix up the fabric so it's going to be matching the front pocket like it does in the pattern. I have 2 cuts of this and then also 2 cuts of lining fabric. All 4 of these are interfaced with the Shape Flex, and then 2 cuts of foam interfacing as well. All right, pattern piece H is going to be for the very base of the bag, so the bottom of the bag. You're going to need 2 cuts of your exterior fabric and then also 2 cuts of your lining fabric. Pattern piece I is for these zipper tabs. These are for that front pocket. So I'm using the same material for the front pocket as I am for the zipper tabs. These are interfaced with the Shape Flex. Pattern piece J is for your lining and also your slip pocket. So you're going to have 2 cuts that you make by folding on the dashed line, just like that, and then cut 2 shorter cuts from this. from your lining fabric, and then 2 larger cuts using just the whole template from your lining fabric. All 4 of these interface with Shape Flex, and then also 2 cuts of foam interfacing. Pattern piece K is going to be your zipper pocket facing. This is just going to help install that lining zipper. And then pattern piece L are going to be 2 cuts of your lining fabric. This is going to be for the zipper on the inside of the bag. All right, finally we have pattern piece N, which is going to be a cut of foam interfacing for the base of your bag. Then you're going to have 2 cuts of exterior fabric for the handles. So these are going to be the little short handles that go on the top of the bag. I'm just going to use waterproof canvas for that. And then I have 1 very long cut of my waterproof canvas, and then 2 slightly shorter cuts of that pocket fabric, and these are going to be for the crossbody strap. Now this is completely optional. If you're not doing the crossbody strap, just skip this. But since I didn't have 1 long piece of this quilt cotton that would be long enough, I have 2 cuts and I will attach them together. So let's start with these rolled handles. First, take your 2 handle straps, and then on the wrong side, mark a center line. Now, if you're using quilt cotton here, you can use an iron to fold this. Since I'm using the waterproof canvas, I'm going to use some tape. So I have this very sticky 1/2 inch wide tape, and it's a double-sided tape, and I'm just going to run it right over that center marked line along the entire strip. All right, now once I have the tape in place, I'm just going to remove the paper, and now I'm going to fold the long raw edges wrong sides together up to meet that middle line. And if you don't want to use tape here, you can use clips, or you can iron it if you're using quilt cotton or cotton woven. Fold in both of the long raw edges to meet in the middle. Now, if you want to make these straps shorter, now's a good time to do that. I find the straps are long enough, but they are shoulder straps. If you want this to be more of like an elbow strap, you could take off about 4 inches off of each of these straps, and then they would be smaller. That's going to be a personal preference, how short you make these straps. So now, when you take your piping, you're going to cut your piping so that it is 8 inches shorter than your strap. So now that I have my piping cut, what I did is I measured in 4 inches in from each of the short edges here, and made a little mark on the back, the wrong side of my strap. Now I'm just making it right in the middle, so it's not going to be seen anywhere, but that way it shows me exactly where I need to lay my piping. Remember, my piping is 8 inches shorter, so if I go 4 inches in from each side, it should be centered just like that. Now I'm going to grab a skinnier double-sided tape, and I am going to just lay this between those 2 marks, and I'm just covering those raw edges that are meeting in the middle with my tape, and this is just going to hold the piping in place so I don't have to worry about it moving around when I'm sewing. And I'm only adding this tape between those marks. I'm not going past them. I'm going to do this for both of my straps. Now I can just remove that paper, and I can lay my piping down, and I'm just centering it on that tape right over where those raw edges are meeting. This is on the back of my handle. There you go. Now do this for both straps. So now we're going to fold our handles in half, wrapping them around that piping, just like this. And I'm going to grab some clips to hold these edges together. So now none of the long raw edges should be seen anymore. You can fold them in half all the way down. And just make sure that piping is tucked into that fold in the center. We don't want it kind of peeking out through the sides at any point. So I just grabbed an air erasing marker, and I measured 3.5 inches in from each short edge, and that's going to be where I start and stop stitching. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch between those marks. So 3.5 inches in from each short edge. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. We're just going to top stitch at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can make it bigger if you'd like. I will be using a zipper foot here to help me get close to this binding without having any sort of kind of wonky seams anywhere. Do this for both of your straps. All right, once you have these handles stitched in place, you can just set them to the side. So now grab 2 of your piece E's. These are your short handle connectors, and on the back, mark a midpoint line running along the long edges. Now you can press this with an iron, or you can use tape or clips, whatever's easiest for you here. But I'm just going to add some double-sided tape right along that midpoint line on both of my connectors. And then I'm going to remove the paper from the tape. And then fold the long raw edges of my connector up, wrong sides together to meet that midpoint mark, and just tape together. Again, this might be quicker or easier for you if you just use clips here or press it with your iron. Do this for both of your piece E's. Now we're going to take these to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along both long edges on both of these connectors at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have these top stitched, grab 2 of your rectangle rings and on the bottom edge, one of the bottom short edges, mark 1 inch up on the back side of these strap connectors. Then grab a rectangle ring, slide it through the top, and fold down this top edge here, wrong sides together, so that it meets up with that 1 inch mark down here on the bottom. So it shouldn't come all the way down to the bottom here. It should be just be 1 inch up from the bottom edge here. And then you can grab some clips to hold this together. Do the same thing with your other strap connector and rectangle ring. Okay, now you can just leave these clipped or you can add a small piece of double-sided tape right along the middle here. As long as you keep your double-sided tape, especially if you use this really sticky stuff, as long as you keep it right in the middle, for the most part, you should be okay. So for example here, I'm just gonna cut off a piece of double-sided tape that's like 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch long. And then I'll unclip one of these, fold this up, add the double-sided tape, see, right in the middle, so it's not near my top stitching. And then I'll push this down to meet that mark again. And I should be okay when I stitch this because I'll be stitching it right here by the ring and along the sides. I should be okay in avoiding that double-sided tape. So I'm gonna do this for both of them. All right, once these are prepped, just put them to the side. Now grab your 2 long handle connectors. These are piece F, and on the back, once again, mark a midpoint line going down the long sides. Also, I'll be using my double-sided tape again. You can see where we're going with this. So I'm just gonna add the double-sided tape right along that midpoint line. And then just like we've done previously, we're going to remove the paper and fold our long edges up, wrong sides together to meet that midpoint line. So once you have all the long edges folded wrong sides together, we can take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along the 2 long edges. I top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. The pattern calls for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's totally up to you. You could even do 1/8 and a 1/4 inch if you want like a nice top stitching decorative strap here. All right, so now I have it top stitched. Now I top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I think the reason the pattern has you top stitch this at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance is because when we attach it to the bag, we can attach it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So that way you're not going over stitches you've already made. You know what I mean? I don't mind tracing my top stitching stitches, but if you wanted to have a more professional look, definitely do the 1/4 inch seam allowance here and then the 1/8 of an inch later. Since I'm using that 1/2 of an inch double-sided tape that is very, very sticky, my needle and my machine absolutely hate it. So if I do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I will be sewing over that and it would not be good. It'd be very bad. So now grab your 2 remaining rectangle rings and on the back of your long straps, measure 6.5 inches from the bottom edge up and make a little line. And again, this is on the wrong side. Now take one of your rectangle rings, insert it through the top edge, and bring that top raw edge wrong sides together down to meet that marked line on the back of your strap. I'm gonna add a clip here just for now. Do the same thing with the other rectangle ring. And now just like I did on the shorter ones, I'm just gonna cut a very small cut of this double-sided tape and just add it here in an area where I'm hoping I don't sew over. So mine is just right above that little marked line in between all my stitching, and then I can lay this back down. And that way when I trace my top stitching on the front and go close to the rectangle ring later, I should be avoiding that tape. So I'm gonna do this for both of them. All right, once you have these prepped, you can set them to the side. So if you're doing the crossbody strap, let's just prep our tabs for that. I'm doing mine a little bit different from the pattern because I'm not going to be using the grommets. I'm just going to be adding D-rings to this. So on the back, I marked my center lines and I added my double stick tape. So just like we've been doing, I can fold my long edges up, wrong sides together on to meet that midpoint line. And now I'm going to top stitch along both of these long edges on both of my tabs at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now I'm just going to take this strap and wrap it around the straight edge of my D-ring on the wrong side, so then I pull them wrong sides together and leave it like that. Again, the pattern has you add grommets to this here for a different look. Because I'm doing it this way, these straps do end up being a little on the longer side. So when we attach this to the bag, I'm gonna try to kind of tighten this up a little bit then. But these are now prepped and I'm gonna put these to the side. All right, now let's work on our crossbody strap. So I'm gonna start with the quilt cotton version first. So I have 2 strips here that are both pretty long, but not quite long enough. So I'm going to attach them together. So I have a directional print, so I'm gonna make sure the direction is the same. I'm gonna lay them both right side up, and this is how I want it to look in the end. So then I'm gonna take the one on the right, and I'm going to fold it right side down and perpendicular to my other strap, just like this. And now I drew a diagonal line from the top left corner down to the bottom corner here where the bottom edge of the bottom strip is. And that's gonna be my stitch line. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine, and keeping everything perpendicular like this, I'm going to sew along this marked line. So once I have these sewn together, I'm just gonna trim the seam allowance down anywhere between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. Doesn't have to be too tiny here. Get that triangle out of there. And then I'm gonna open this up and I'm gonna press this with my iron. So I'm gonna press it so that the seam is open. So I'm just gonna use my fingers here to kind of open up that seam back there and just give that a good press with my iron. Okay, now my quilt cotton part of the strap is much longer than my waterproof canvas part. So I'm just going to kind of measure them out real quick. My waterproof canvas strap is about 55 inches long, but you can see the quilt cotton part is much longer. Now I actually like my quilt cotton part of the strap to be longer because I wrap it around the bottom edge of the waterproof canvas, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So I'm going to trim this down so that it is 1.5 inches longer on each edge, which means it's going to be about 3 inches longer total. There we go. Now it's trimmed down just, about 3.5 inches longer than the waterproof canvas strap. And now for these, we're going to do what we've been doing this whole time. We're going to fold the long edges wrong sides together. So once again, use a ruler and a marker. Mark the midpoint line along the back of both of your straps. Now remember, these are different widths. My quilt cotton strap is a little bit more narrow than the waterproof canvas strap. Just do your best to mark the midpoint line along both of the long edges, all the way down both straps, and then fold the raw long edges wrong sides together up to meet that midpoint line. So now I'm using the double-sided tape to hold down the waterproof canvas part of my strap, but I will use my iron to press down the raw edges for the quilt cotton part of the strap. Okay, so now I have my cotton strap pressed so that the long edges come and meet in the middle on the back, just like that. I have my waterproof canvas taped together, and then I added another piece of tape over the raw edges on the back of my waterproof canvas strip. And it's just covering up those raw edges, and I'm gonna use that to attach these 2 pieces together. Now, I wanna note too, on my quilt cotton strap, I folded in the short edge, I folded them in wrong sides together about 1/2 inch, and then refolded the edges just like that. And what that allows is me to have a nice, clean, no raw edge, short edge on the end here. I did that for both of the ends of the strap. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to lay my quilt cotton strap wrong side down against the back of the waterproof canvas strap. And I'm going to let this short edge over here overhang about 1 inch, just like that. So I can remove the paper, and I'm just gonna tape these 2 pieces together. Now, my quilt cotton strip is slightly more narrow than the waterproof canvas strip. So when I'm doing this, I'm focused more on centering it and not so much matching up the long edges together. Just make sure you keep everything folded as well as you can. All right, if you get to the end and you find that your quilt cotton strap is just a bit too long, we can trim this down and then just press in the end again. So I'm gonna trim this down to about 1.5 inches. And then I can refold in the short edge about 1/2 inch, and then fold the long edges again. And then that way I can take this and wrap it around the raw edge of my waterproof canvas strip. And that just covers it up. So I'm gonna use clips to hold the ends in place since I'm not using tape there. So on the other side, I already have it pressed, so I just have to fold it over. And then I'll use clips to hold this edge down as well. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch along all the edges at 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going to be top stitching with the quilt cotton right side up because to me that's the right side of the strap. The waterproof canvas side is going to be the back of the strap. I'm going to go over the short edges as well. And then after that, I'll go back over the bottom edges that are folded over here just to really get this all tacked down nicely. And then I'll add a rivet here as well. All right, isn't that a cute strap? I love that. I love these little two-tone straps. They're extra work. They are. They take more time, but they're adorable. Okay, so now I'm going to finish up this strap with some rivets. So I'm going to grab one of my short edges and my slider. And I'm going to insert my short edge up so the back of my strap is up against the slider. And so I'm inserting it through the right side. Move my slider over so that I can insert this over to the left side and pull it through. And now I just want this to overhang about 1 inch, really. So I have kind of like a little rectangle down here from stitching down the edges of that fold over piece of the strap. So I'm just going to kind of tuck it in there. And then right in the middle of this rectangle, I'm just going to poke one hole using my rivet press hole punch. And you can be as decorative as you want when you're using rivets. You can add 2 rivets here, 3 rivets, however you want to do it. So I'm just going to grab one of my little rivets and pop it in there for now. There we go. So now I have my strap and one edge is wrapped around the slider just like that. I'm going to straighten out my strap so that it's the wrong side, which is my waterproof canvas side, up. And I'm going to insert my hook so that the hook part is against the quilt cotton side. So whichever side you want to be the outer side, just have the hook on that side. And then slide your strap, keeping it all nice and straight. And then insert your remaining edge up through the slider on the side that has the little fold over part, the back part here. So just insert it through your slider like that, and then insert it through the opposite edge so that you can just slide it all into place. So now you should have your hook on one side, and then your slider in the middle, and then your edge over here. Grab your remaining hook with the hook side on the right side, so fabric side. Line it up just like that, and then wrap around your edge. And again, I have a nice little rectangle here that I can use as a guideline for where to put my snap. So I'm just gonna pop a hole right in the middle of that rectangle, and then I'll insert a rivet to hold it in place. There we go. So now I have my hooks attached on both ends. I have my slider in the middle. So now I'm gonna grab my other press. This press has the die already on it to set these rivets. So I have my little rivet setting die here. So I can just put this in and push it down. And now that rivet is set and secure. I don't have to worry about it coming out. I'm gonna do the same thing with the rivet by the slider. I'm just gonna put it in there and push it down. And there we go. Now our strap is done. Isn't that adorable? I love this strap. Oh, I gotta make more straps with this fabric. This is amazing. You can set this to the side now. So now let's start prepping our bag. So grab your piece A, which is this little like U-shaped piece. And then grab your little short handle connectors. These are the ones that don't fold all the way in half. They have their rectangle ring attached just like that. Now, if you haven't already, you want to mark the midpoint of the top and the bottom of this curved unit here. So that's easiest if you just fold it in half. And then I just use some scissors to trim right along that edge, the tiniest little triangle. So now we want to measure 2 inches away on each side from that midpoint mark. Now I don't know if you can see, but I used a piece of white chalk to just draw straight vertical lines to help me line all this up. I'm going to grab my tape. We're going to take one of our short strap connectors and we're going to line it up so the raw edges are along the bottom edge right here at this little curvy part here. And the left edge, so if I'm working on the right side here, the left edge is up against that marked line. So these strap connectors are going to go outside of our marked line just like that. There should be 4 inches in between them. To help hold this in place, I'm just going to use again some double-sided tape. Try to use some skinny double-sided tape so we don't have to sew over it. And I'm just going to place this on the back of my connector. And then I can just tape this down again so that the bottom raw edges are along that curved edge on the bottom of our piece. And it's lined up on that straight mark so that we can keep it as straight as possible. I mean, it might always end up a little kind of wonky. That's just my bags. My bags are wonky. But we want to keep it as straight as possible. So you're going to repeat this with your other strap connector on the left side. Remember, going outside of your marked line, just keeping it lined up with that marked line as much as you can. Okay, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch around our strap connectors. So since I did 1/8 of an inch top stitch already, I'm just going to trace over that top stitching from the bottom all the way up, and I'm going to get as close as I can to my rectangle ring and then go back down. I'm going to use a zipper foot to help with this because we really don't want this moving around a lot. You really want it tight in there. I'm going to do this on both of these. If you did your top stitching at a 1/4 inch seam allowance when you originally made your little connectors, you're going to still do 1/8 of an inch now. So you're going to have 2 really lovely top stitchings on this. All right, there we go. Isn't that adorable? Okay, we can set this to the side for just a moment. So now grab your 18-inch zipper that has the 2 zipper pulls on it and your 2 piece eyes, which are these zipper tabs. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our zipper tab and we're going to line up the short edge of the zipper tab with the end of your zipper and lay them right sides together just like that. And we can just clip this in place. Do the same thing on the other side. Now let's sew along both of these edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these stitched in place, what I like to do is lay the zipper wrong side up and then pull the zipper tabs away. And now what we want to do is we want to fold these short edges that are raw on our zipper tabs wrong sides together at a 1/4 inch. The easiest way I found to do this is to mark a line that is 1/2 of an inch in from the short edge and then just fold your fabric in to meet that line. And you can press this with your iron if you'd like, or you can just finger press it. And then you're going to fold the whole unit up to meet the seam that you just made. So this folded edge should come to the wrong side of your zipper, and it should just go right up against your stitches. Try to get it as straight as possible. So mine just barely covers the stitches on the back of my zipper. And then I'm going to flatten out the whole zipper tab. And the zipper tab extends farther than the edge of your zipper, so it's not going to be right up against your zipper. So on the front it looks like this, and on the back it's all nice and clean. That way we don't have any raw edges. So do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so now we want to take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along the top edge closest to the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and also at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We really want to make sure we tack down the back edge of these zipper tabs. All right, so now my zipper tabs are attached. Before I move on, I'm just going to trim down my tabs just slightly so that they're the same width as my zipper tape. So I'm really just shaving off about 1/8 of an inch on each edge, but that way it's just all nice and straight. All right, you can set your zipper to the side now. So next up, we want to fuse the fusible fleece cut to the back of the exterior pocket. Now, fusible fleece, depending on what type you're using, can be kind of a beast. So I have a piece of quilt cotton here, and it is interfaced with the Shape Flex. I'm going to lay it right side up, wrong side down, and the wrong side is against the kind of gritty, sandy side of the fusible fleece. That's the glue. Now, I've found that if I just hold my iron in one place when attaching fusible fleece this way, my fabric starts to bubble and warp. It's like the fusible fleece glue contracts and it just pinches in all my fabric. So I use a very hot iron with steam, but I keep it moving. I don't hold it in one place for any seconds. I just keep it moving for a while all over this to keep it as flat as possible. All right, once you have that fusible fleece fused on, let's start marking some midpoints. So we want to mark the midpoint on the top of all of our piece B's and also on both sides of our zipper, and if you haven't already, on the bottom side of piece A. Alrighty, so first let's work on our zipper. So take your zipper and lay it right side down. Now on the bottom edge of the zipper, on that midpoint mark, we're going to line that up with the bottom edge of our piece A, just like this. Grab your clips and clip that midpoint mark first, and then take the left edge and we're going to just rotate it so that the bottom of our zipper tab comes to the bottom of piece A, and just line up the edges right along this bottom edge. I like to add clips on the very bottom as well. Let's do the same thing on the right side. We're just going to line up this bottom edge over here. All right, once you have that clipped in place, now we're just going to clip along the entire curved edge. And I know this is a little intimidating. This is kind of a crazy curve. You might find it easier to open up your zipper So you're just dealing with the side of the zipper tape that we're sewing. But just go inch by inch, lining them up and adding a clip. All right, I know it's a little wonky. It's okay, don't worry about it. So now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're going to baste this in place at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I will be using a zipper foot for this and a nice big basting stitch, like 4 millimeters or more. Just a nice basting stitch right along the edge. Go slow and use a stiletto to try to get this as flat and straight as possible. All right, once you have this basted, set it to the side and grab one of your lining B pieces. And what we want to do is we want to trim off 1/8 of an inch from the bottom. So if you have a ruler that has the 1/8 of an inch grid mark, just line that up right along the edge and trim it down with your rotary cutter. If you don't, you should have a 1/4 inch grid mark on there. Just find halfway from the edge of the ruler to that 1/4 inch and just trim down. We just want to shave off a little bit of the bottom edge of one of our lining panels. We don't, not all of them, just one of them. Okay, once you have that prepped, grab your A unit with the zipper and lay it right side up. The wrong side of the zipper is up. And then take one of your lining panels here and we're gonna lay it right side down and we're gonna match up this midpoint mark right here that's on the top of our pocket piece. When it's upside down, it's on the bottom. And we're gonna line it up with that midpoint mark on the zipper and the A piece that we just stitched together. So keep the other side of the zipper tape out of the way and line up these midpoint marks and clip together. And now I know at this point it's like, how are we gonna sew that together? You'll be fine. So then take your top left edge here and we're gonna just pull it down. And you gotta twist it a little bit. You're gonna twist it to meet right sides together with the bottom edge that you basted on, just like this. Clip those together. Do the same thing on the other side. I know this is a little awkward. You just gotta do your best to visualize it. So this is gonna go down and the straight edge of our lining piece is gonna be along this little straight edge right here on piece A and clip together. And you might find this easiest to turn the whole unit so that you have the back of your lining piece wrong side up. And now we're just going to continue clipping this in place. So we have like a bit of a bowl here. See how the top unit here just curves around the curve of your pocket piece? So I always like to clip the straight edges first and then I work with the curved edges after that. So it really just depends on your material how difficult this is going to be. Since I'm using this quilt cotton and this waterproof canvas, this is actually curving together pretty nicely. When I was using the waterproof canvas and the vinyl, this was a little bit more tricky. All right, once you have it all clipped together, now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Is it easier if the zipper is open or closed? I feel like it's easier if the zipper is open, but you do have to be mindful of where this is and keep it out of the way. You also have 2 zipper pulls here you gotta keep an eye on. So you gotta move them out of the way as you're stitching. Don't sew over the little decorative pull parts. If you're really struggling, if you have the zipper open and you're struggling so much, try closing the zipper and sewing it that way, and vice versa. Just try it out, but go slow. And I'm going to be sewing with the wrong side of the lining panel B up. So I'll be sewing right along like this. Once you have that stitched in place, let's just push this down so that the seam goes behind this lining B piece here. So you see down here, the seam should go behind the lining piece. And you shouldn't have to trim anything or cut anything. It should just kind of nest in pretty nicely. These types of curves are a little bit easier than other types of curves. So now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch along the lining piece, just holding down this seam behind it. So we're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance right inside and just making sure along the way that the seam is held down behind this lining piece right here. There we go. All right, how are you doing? You doing okay with this? You should start seeing it kind of coming together now. It's looking pretty neat. This is challenging, but you can do it. It's doable. Okay, so now we're gonna grab the exterior front pocket piece, piece B, and we're gonna lay this wrong side down, but we're gonna flip it just like that, okay? So the bottom of piece B now is at the top, and we're gonna take that midpoint along the top of piece B, and we're gonna line it up with the midpoint on the edge of the zipper we haven't done anything with yet. So we're gonna kind of push the zipper down, and we want these two to be right sides together. So don't try to, do anything like that. You gotta pull it down, maybe pull it up a little bit, and clip those midpoints right sides together. You might want to add a couple clips here because it does like to move around. And now we're going to take this top left edge and we're just going to rotate it down to meet the bottom of the zipper tab, not the bottom of the exterior A piece. Go ahead and take that and fold it out of the way. We don't want to sew that. We're clipping this to the zipper tab. All right. So just like that. And you'll notice this whole thing is going to start kind of folding in half on itself. So over here, we're going to take the other edge and we're just going to kind of rotate this to pull down that zipper. And again, move this A piece out of the way. We don't want that. We just want the zipper tab and pull them right sides together. It's like you're making a little calzone type of feel right now. It becomes like a little poofy semicircle, okay? So once you have the ends and the midpoint clipped together, now we're just going to clip along the curved edge. I do find this easier to open the zipper. You might not. Try both if you're struggling. If you're doing it one way and it's easy, then don't try the other way. You're good. Okay, there we go. Now we have the exterior clipped together with the zipper. Now let's go baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now it should be a little inside out like this. You have your lining over here and then the back of your exterior just like this. You want to take this top part of A and just tuck it inside. And this might be easier if you zip close this zipper. Just at least for this part right here where we're kind of clipping it together. Okay, so this is kind of what we have now. So now what we want to do is take our remaining lining panel and we're going to lay it right side down against the other lining panel, and it's going to be clipped to this raw edge that we just clipped the exterior panel to. So just like we've been doing, it's easiest if we do the middle first. So I'm clipping the right side of my last lining panel to the wrong side of my zipper, and I've got the whole top of that A unit tucked inside here. Everything's just smushed together. And then I'm going to clip the bottom edges, again making sure that this little nub right here from A is out of the way. I don't want that in this. So clip it out of the way, push it out of the way. It does not need to be sewn here. There we go. And then I'll do the other edge as well. Again, taking this piece and just pulling it as far as I can get it out of the way. You don't want to accidentally sew over that. It's gonna be a mess. And clip that together. And then we can go around and just clip these two pieces together. This shouldn't be that difficult because they are the same size and nothing is really bowl or curved in any way, just, basic curves. You should be able to do this. You can do it. Now here's the thing about this. Keeping the zipper closed keeps everything out of the way, but it makes it hard to get that zipper tape to flatten out. If you open the zippers, it's a little bit easier to get the zipper tape that you're working on to flatten out. But you want to make sure you keep the other side of the zipper tape out of the way. So there's a few things to think about here. Okay, so now we're going to sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Backstitch at the bottom down here because we're going to be turning this out. If you're going to keep your zipper open like I am, as you go, just keep putting your hand inside, making sure to move everything out of the way. Nothing is getting caught in those seams. All right, once you have it all sewn together, let's just turn this so that it's right side out. Let's take a look at how it turned out. Push out those curved edges. Aw, that's so cute. I love that. Okay, so now what we want to do is top stitch along this pocket piece. So to do that, we kind of pull this out like this. So you're gonna separate the pieces and you're just gonna pull these together. Now you can press this with an iron if it's easier, but I'm just gonna kind of pull the lining and the exterior pieces together and just top stitch along this exterior front flap at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the zipper. This is what it looks like. You can give it a press if you like, but we are going to be shoving this around a lot later, so I would wait. Now, if you want to add a bag tag, now's a great time to do it. I think a bag tag would look great centered in between these two right here or on the pocket. On the other bag, I did add it to the pocket. If you want to do that, add it now because we're about to close up this hole right here. So I think this time I'm going to add my bag tag in between the straps on this A panel here. So I just measured 2 inches down from this midpoint mark and made a dot. And I'm going to use that dot to center my washer and mark placement for the prongs of my bag tag. If you have a sew-on bag tag, you can just sew it on right here if you'd like. So now I'm just going to grab my seam ripper and very gently rip along those marks I just made. And then I can insert my bag tag in just like this. Make sure it's straight. Okay, now on the back, since I just have 1 layer of waterproof canvas, I'm going to beef it up a bit. So I'm going to get a scrap of fusible fleece, and I'm going to mark those same prong marks on this fusible fleece, and then just cut those same small holes. And I'm going to add this over those prongs, and then add my washer. So that just gives it a little something extra to hold on to so it doesn't end up ripping the waterproof canvas. And then I can just push down those prongs. Make sure this is straight. There we go. And then I'll grab another piece of fusible fleece, and on the back, I'm just gonna add some glue here. And you can use any sort of firmer interfacing here, just something that's going to protect your bag. So you wanna protect the panel that this is attached to, and then you also wanna cover up those prongs on the back so they don't rub against your lining fabric and cause a hole over time. So now we want to close up the hole on the bottom. So you want to pull this so that these zipper tabs fold in on themselves. So the raw edges of your zipper tabs should meet, and the middle of the folded zipper tab should come out towards the edge of the panel. So clip that, and it's easiest if you just kind of put your finger in and pull on it. If everything, is lined up correctly, it should naturally fold like that. But we're folding our zipper tabs so that they're pinched out. They're not pinched in, they're pinched out. And once you have those clipped, go ahead and clip along the entire bottom edge. We're clipping together the lining panels, the pocket panel, the A panel, everything. We're just gonna close up this entire hole down here. So now we can just baste this closed at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so as you might notice, right here, it's going to start getting bulky. It's right here where all the seams are. So now is a good time to change your needle to a bigger needle, 9014, even a jeans needle, something like that would work perfect here because we are going to add to this very bulky seam. So now grab one of your exterior bottom PCs and we're just going to attach it to the bottom edge of this unit we've been working on. So lay it right sides together so that the flat edge is along the bottom flat edge. Okay, now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that stitched in place, you're just gonna fold that bottom piece down. Now I do have a bit of a pleat over here on the left. I'm gonna leave it. So now we're just gonna top stitch along this bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Push it out of the way as best you can, keep it nice and flat. This is the only part that I found my needle broke on the previous bag. So just be careful as you go over these very, very thick seams here. All right, now that you have the front panel all built, you're gonna grab your piece of foam for that front panel and lay this on top of it. Now, each time I found mine wasn't exactly the right size. Down here, it's just not the right size. And I think it's because the pocket pulls in the sides of this so much, but it turns out fine, so it's fine. All right, once you have this clipped to your foam, let's just baste this in place at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. one panel is ready to go, and it's adorable. So go ahead and put this front panel to the side. Okay, now we're gonna grab the exterior main panel, panel D, and I want you to mark the midpoint marks along the top and the bottom edges of this one. And then grab your 2 completed long handles. All right, and then using those midpoint marks, I marked 2 lines that are going vertical and each are 2 inches away from that midpoint. So there's 4 inches separating them, and I marked all the way from the bottom to the top. And now what we're gonna do is just line up our long straps so that the raw edge goes along the bottom straight edge and the inner side of the strap goes right up against that marked line, just like that. So we'll do the same with the other one. Now I'm going to add tape to the back of these to help hold this in place. If you're using quilt cotton here, you can use pins. This double-sided tape is easiest, but once again, I'm making sure I'm only running it along the center, and I'm not going all the way to the top, and I'm not going all the way to the bottom because I really don't want to sew over this. So now I can just remove the paper from the tape, and then I'll just line this up again so that the bottom edge is along the bottom of the panel, and the inner edge of my strap is along that white marked line. Here we go. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, the inner edge is going to be along that marked line. So now I'm just going to trace along the top stitching I already made, and I'm going to get as close as I can to this rectangle ring and go across and then go back down the top stitching. To get close to these, I will be using a zipper foot. Here we go. Isn't that pretty? And here's the thing. If you wanted to make this bag, but you did not want to go through all of this with the pocket, you could just make 2 of these. Make identical ones of this right here and then add the bottom edge. And you can mix up the fabric. You could use a contrasting strap here and then this. You can make it really adorable and skip this front pocket and this whole panel here if you don't want to do that. Okay, once you have those attached, grab your remaining bottom panel here, and we're just going to lay this right side down, matching up the long straight edges. This should be easier than it was for the front. Let's clip along this edge. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that stitched on, now we're just gonna fold down that bottom panel, and you can press it with an iron if it makes it easier. And now we can top stitch along this bottom folded edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now take this exterior panel and lay it on top of one of your sew-in foam pieces and just clip it to that foam. And now we can base this to the foam at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. You can go ahead and set this to the side. Okay, first grab your long zipper tape if you're using zipper tape. It's 26 inches long, and add both of your zipper pulls to it just like we did on the front pocket, and they should close when they come together. Next, grab your piece G foam and your exterior piece G and just lay your exterior piece on top of the foam, wrong side on top of it. You can go ahead and do this for both of your exterior zipper gussets. And now let's just take this to the sewing machine and baste this exterior piece to our foam on both of our gussets. Okay, now let's mark some midpoints. So fold your gusset pieces in half, and if you don't already have midpoints marked, like I have midpoints marked on my foam, go ahead and mark your midpoints. So I'll mark them on my lining gusset pieces, and then also mark the midpoint on your zipper. So I like to move the zipper pull out of the way, and then just fold it in half and pinch and mark your midpoint. So now grab one of the exterior units and lay it right side up, and then grab your zipper unit and lay it right side down and match up those midpoints. So I'll clip those midpoints together first and then just clip along the entire straight edge. We're matching up the zipper to straight edges for this entire gusset. Now baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that basted on, grab one of your lining pieces and lay it right side down on the back of your zipper. So it should be right side together with the exterior. and just line it up with that exterior piece. Your zipper should be longer than your units. Okay, now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have them stitched together, just push each away from the zipper. So push the lining and the exterior away from the zipper. And I actually like to line them up and clip the raw edges together because we want to get this as flat and even as possible, but it can be kind of hard with that foam. All right, once you have this straightened out as much as you can get it, let's top stitch along this edge right along the zipper at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that top stitch, now just baste the sides and the bottom edge together so it all stays neatly in place like this. So you have one side of your gusset attached to your zipper. Now we're just going to repeat that for the other side. So grab your remaining exterior gusset unit and lay it right side up. Take your zipper unit and lay it right side down and match up the midpoint on the raw edge of the zipper with the midpoint on this top straight edge of your exterior gusset, and then just clip along this entire edge. Now let's baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that basted in place, take your last lining panel and lay it right side down against the back of your zipper. And then just like before, match up the midpoint marks. Remember, we're only working with the straight edges. We're not working on curved edges. Your zipper should now be sandwiched in between your exterior and your lining panel. Now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that you have them sewn together, just push the lining and the exterior away from the zipper. And just like on the other side, I'm going to clip the bottom raw edges together just so I can get everything as lined up as possible. All right, once you have that prepped, now we can top stitch along this edge right along the zipper at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, and as you can see, I went ahead and basted along the bottom and the sides as well. So now all of my gusset panels are sewn onto the zipper. So now let's work on the base of the bag. So take your 2 exterior base panels and lay them right sides together, and we're going to clip along the shorter edge. So we're just going to attach them along their shorter edge and then make a nice long kind of skinny panel for the base. Now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have these sewn together, then just press them apart, and you can use an iron here or finger press, and then press open the seam on the back. So now with that seam pressed open, we can go back to the sewing machine and top stitch along both sides of this seam at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that top stitched, grab your foam base piece and then lay your exterior base piece right side up, wrong side down on top of your foam. And now you can clip this to the foam. And now let's just base this exterior piece to the foam at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we can add the purse feet. So you're going to measure using the center seam to mark 4 spots for your purse feet. The measurements are in the pattern. Once you have your dots marked, you can then lay the washer for the purse feet over the dot and mark the slit lines using that washer. So I'm going to do this for all 4 spots. And now I'm going to grab the seam ripper and just rip right along those slits, making sure I don't go past whatever I marked. We want this to be tighter, not looser. Okay, now take your purse feet and insert the prongs through the slits you just made. So they should go through the exterior and the foam. And then you can add a washer over the prongs and pull the prongs apart, just like that. So go ahead and repeat this for all 4 spots. Okay, and once I have all those in place, I'm just gonna grab some scrap pieces of fusible fleece, and I'm going to use my glue to glue the back of them, and then just glue these over those prongs, just to make sure those prongs don't rub against the lining and cause a hole. All right, there we go. Now we have the exterior ready to go. I will steam out these creases, don't worry. I know that's driving me crazy too. So now let's grab the lining bottom panel, and the same thing, we're gonna lay them right sides together and sew along the short middle edge right here at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have those stitched together, just press them open away from one another and then press that seam open on the back. And now let's top stitch along both sides of the seam at about an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, you can go ahead and put these two to the side for just a moment. Now let's grab our gusset again and let's add our crossbody straps. This is only if you're doing it. If you're not doing it, go ahead and skip this. So you're gonna measure up from the bottom edge of your crossbody strap about 5/8 of an inch. If you're using a D-ring like I am, you can go more. You could go to 3/4 of an inch or probably even more than that. But I'm gonna stick with the 5/8 of an inch. And what we wanna do is line up our strap so the D-ring is pointed in towards the center of the gusset where the zipper is. And that line we marked is going to line up right along the edge of the raw edges of our gusset. So it's going to overextend the fabric just like the zipper does. But we're paying attention to that line. And just center it on your zipper. Grab some clips to hold it in place. Let's do the same thing on the opposite side. Just centering it on the zipper, lining up that line with the bottom raw edge, and clipping in place. Okay, now we can just stitch this down in place at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're just gonna hold this onto the gusset. All right, now it's time to build the whole gusset. So take your main gusset panel and your exterior base, and we're gonna lay them right sides together, exterior to exterior. So the exterior gusset and the exterior base are gonna come together, right sides together. And then line up these short edges over here. Your zipper tape and your strap is going to overextend. That's supposed to do that. These should match up pretty well. They might be just a little off, but for the most part, these short edges should be the same size. And now flip this over so you have the gusset lining side up, and then grab your lining base and lay that right side down. So lining base, right sides together with lining gusset. And just line it up with that short edge that you already have clipped, and just add this to the clips. So now we have a little sandwich here with our base on the top and the bottom and our gusset in the middle, all together. Okay, now we're gonna sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance through all of these layers. If you haven't already, you might wanna start upping your needle now. All right, now let's pull the lining and exterior base units away from the gusset, just like this. Doesn't that look cute? This is gonna be a cute one, guys. Okay, so do your best to get it all straight and lined up. And now we're going to top stitch along the base here at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now we're just gonna do the same thing for the other end. So let's take our exterior base and pull it up right sides together with the other end of our gusset. And once again, we're just going to line up these short edges. So just like before, it's gonna be exterior right sides together with exterior, and then lining right sides together with lining. So do exterior first, and then we're gonna take the lining from behind and pull that up to meet lining right sides together. And you'll notice right here, it's too big, so it's gonna kind of get squished in there. Just don't even worry about that. We're just worried about this one edge right here. So I'm gonna clip it all together. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, this is what we have, so we're just gonna flip it all so that it's right side out. There we go. So we can pull this so that the exterior comes away from the gusset, and then also the lining comes away from the gusset just like that. Get it as taut as possible. You might find it helpful here to grab some clips and clip these where you want them to go so that it doesn't kind of sneak up on you when we're top stitching. And now we're gonna go and top stitch along this edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're top stitching on the bottom exterior part and also through the lining, but it's the base part we're top stitching on. All right, here's our gusset. Isn't this looking good? Oh, I think this is gonna be a pretty bag, guys. So now what we wanna do is baste the lining gusset to the exterior gusset. So since it's curved, it's going to kind of fight you I suggest you clip these edges to one another. They should be the exact same size. So let's put the midpoints together and then just straighten out the edge and add some clips. So now let's take this to the sewing machine and just baste these bases together. We're basting the exterior and the lining pieces wrong sides together with the foam in between. If you have any spots on the gusset side here that need to be rebasted like I have right here, go ahead and do that now. We want this to all be one unit when we're attaching it later. Alright, once you have your gusset all put together, just put this to the side. Now let's work on our lining panels. So first we have the slip pockets. So grab both of your slip pocket pieces and lay them right sides together. And we are concerned about this top straight edge. So line it all up, and then you can add a couple clips along this top straight edge. And now let's sew along that clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have these sewn together, just turn them wrong sides together. So I like to just push up one side first and give that a quick press. And then I'll flip it over and push up the other side. And I'm just trying to keep that sewn edge as straight as possible. So I'm also paying attention to these bottom edges right here to make sure those are lined up. There we go. And then give the whole unit a press. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along that folded top edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now grab one of your lining panels and lay it right side up, and then grab your slip pocket and lay it right along the bottom edge of your lining panel. Just like that. It should line up perfectly with all the little curves and everything. Grab some clips and clip this together. Now let's take this to the sewing machine and let's just baste along the sides and the bottom at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now you can separate slip pockets however you'd like. If you want to leave this as one large slip pocket, that's perfectly fine. I know a lot of people find that most useful. I marked the midpoint on the bottom edge here, and I'm just going to draw a line that goes straight up from that midpoint mark and just separate this into 2 equal sides. You really don't have to be that precise about this. So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm just going to stitch right along the right side of it and then go 1 stitch over on the top and then go right along the left side of it. So I'm just making 2 stitches that just hug this marked line. So now grab your front panel that has a zipper pocket and lay it wrong side up. Take your lining panel with the slip pocket and lay it wrong side down. So these are wrong sides together, and it might be easier to line it up this way since the lining panel is flatter. And just clip these wrong sides together. Alright, now let's take this to the sewing machine and just baste along this entire edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. You should see this is what it looks like. The lining's on one side, the exterior's on the other side. Okay, so now you're going to grab your zipper facing and you're going to draw the rectangle on the back. This is a rectangle that is centered, and then you're going to grab your lining panel. Now, make sure you mark the midpoint along the top edge of your lining panel, and I would also suggest you mark a midpoint on one of the edges on your zipper facing. And using the midpoint on the top of your lining and the midpoint on your facing, center your facing with that midpoint and 1.5 inches down from the top edge. Then I'm going to grab some pins and just pin these 2 units together. Alright, now let's go to the sewing machine and sew along this inner rectangle. It's that 8 inch by 3/8 inch rectangle. You're just going to sew along the 4 edges of your rectangle. Alright, once you have that sewn on, grab a seam ripper and rip along that center line that divides that inner pocket in half. And that rip is just to get it started. And then grab your scissors and cut along that center line until you get to the tip of those little triangles you made. And then follow these edges of the triangle down to the corners of your stitching. Trying to get as close as you can to your stitching without cutting those threads. And do the same thing on the other side. Now, since I'm using quilt cotton, I can actually use an iron for this step. I normally have to use a lot of tape. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this zipper facing and tuck it into that hole and pull it through so that the zipper facing is wrong sides together with the lining. Now, it can seem a little frustrating if you're trying to do it all at once, so I suggest just doing one long edge at a time. So I'm just going to take this long edge and roll it over and try to get that seam area nice and flat. And then I'll grab my iron and just press part of it. And then I can pull out the rest and work on the other side, and then work on the short sides. And you can flip it over and give it a good press from the front as well. Okay, you can set this to the side for just a moment. Okay, grab one of your zipper panels and lay it right side up, and then grab your zipper tape and lay it right side up, and just line up along the top edge, just like that. Both of them are right side up, and then I'm just gonna use some clips to hold this in place. Now, let's sew along this edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it's just barely under a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have that attached, grab your second zipper panel and lay it right side up, and then twist this around and take the opposite edge of your zipper tape and line that up with the top edge of your zipper panel. Again, everything is right side up. Your zipper's right side up and the zipper panel is right side up. The zipper panel you already attached is wrong side up. Okay, now let's stitch along this clipped edge at a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're gonna open this up and we're gonna press our zipper seam so the zipper is up and the lining is pressed away from it. We just want to get this nice and flat. You can definitely use double-sided tape here to hold these down if that's easier for you. There we go. That's looking good. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, now flip this so that the zipper when closed is on the left side. I'm grabbing some wash away double-sided tape. This my sewing machine can sew over and it's fine. And I'm going to add this double-sided tape along the very edge of the zipper tape, and it's not coming past my stitching. So I can see, you know, my stitches when I attach this zipper to the zipper panels, and the zipper tape is not going down past it. It's staying outside of it. So I'm going to add this to both sides of my zipper tape. Now what we're going to do is take the lining panel and we're just going to center this over the zipper and attach it just like that. The edges of your zipper pocket panels should line up with the edges of your pocket facing. So here's my pocket facing. These should all line up just like that, okay? So I'm going to remove the top paper from the tape first, and I'm just going to stick this in place one side at a time. So lining everything up, centering it over my zipper, trying to keep that zipper as straight as possible. Mine never are. My zippers are never straight. It's okay. All right, so I have that top edge taped down. So now I can just flip the bottom part up and out of the way, take the paper off the bottom tape, and just flip it right back down. Make sure your zipper pull doesn't get stuck in that tape, because that's a pain. Okay. So now I have this taped in place, and now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch right outside of our rectangle on the lining panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, once you have that stitched in place, your zipper is all set. So now we're going to take this top zipper panel and we're going to fold it down, just like that. You can press it if you'd like, but you probably don't need to. And now you can see this bottom zipper panel is longer than the top zipper panel. We want to trim that off. So you can grab your ruler and rotary cutter and just move this panel out of the way and just slice it down like that. Or you can just leave it like this and trace it with a marker and then just cut it with your scissors. Okay, so now these two panels should be the same size. Let's clip them together just so they stay in place and don't move around on us. And now we can take this to the sewing machine and sew along the sides and the bottom at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When stitching, stitch with the lining side up and fold it out of the way. So you're just going to go along the side, along the bottom, and along the other side. We're not stitching through the lining panel at any point. Alright, your zipper pocket's now done, so grab your exterior back panel, and you can lay your zipper pocket lining panel right side down. Take your exterior, lay it right side up. We're going to match them up, wrong sides together, and then grab some clips and just clip along all of the edges so it's the exact same size. Okay, now we can baste along all of the edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So one side should look like this, the other side like this. Alright, so this is where we are. We got our back panel lining and exterior, front panel, lining and exterior, and the gusset and bottom lining and exterior. Now we just got to put all three together. Let's just talk about binding for a moment. To be completely honest, I really don't like making double fold binding. It burns my fingers. I don't like it. I don't have any store-bought binding, so I was planning on making binding and showing you how I do that, but instead what we're gonna do is we're gonna use waterproof canvas for our binding. And normally I would only do that if my lining was waterproof canvas, but I think it's gonna work, so we're gonna do that instead. Okay, so I have 2 cuts of waterproof canvas. Each of these are about 48 inches long by 1 inch wide. And when I do binding, I just wrap it around the binding and sew it on. I'll show you. It's much quicker for me. I like it better. So first, let's make sure all 3 of our pieces are ready to go. You're gonna need to have midpoints marked on the top edge of your gusset. So to do that, just take your seams that are on the sides, pull them together, and then pinch, and then just mark that top midpoint. Do this on both sides of the gusset. The midpoint on the base should be that seam that you already have right there. You should have the midpoint marked on the top and the bottom of both of your exterior panels. Okay, so let's start with the front panel. Lay your front panel right side up. Keep your zippers in the middle so they don't get caught in the seams on the side. Now take your gusset panel and you're going to lay your gusset panel right side down, so right sides to right sides, and line up this top edge midpoint mark with the midpoint on your front panel. Let's clip those together. And I'm going to rotate this. And remember, flip this the right way so you don't want to get all tangled. Right now my lining is right side out, and my exteriors are right sides together. And then I'm going to take that bottom seam here between my 2 base panels, and I'm going to use that as my midpoint mark and line it up with the midpoint mark on the bottom of my front panel and clip those together, just like that. Now we need to go around the entire panel, clipping the gusset to the front panel. And I know this is a little tricky because this is pretty thick. Even with quilt cotton, it's thick. So I suggest you do some of the straighter edges first. So I'm going to do the straight edge on the top first and the straight edge on the bottom, and then I do my curves last. And you might find this easier to flip it so you have the lining side of the front panel up, and then you just kind of tuck it into your gusset, making a bowl shape. So I'm just going to go around. These top curves aren't too bad. They're not that sharp. It's that bottom curve, that bottom corner here. That's the one that gets you. That's a tricky one. If you need to, you can grab some scissors and you can cut into your gusset panel over here, right into the seam, no more than the 1/8 of an inch, to help it spread out a little bit around that really tight curve. And that will allow your gusset to kind of spread out and not be so tight. All right, so I have one side clipped. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Also, make sure these rings up here stay down. We don't want them in the seam. We do not want our needle to hit any metal. We don't want that. Don't do that. Once again, I'm just clipping the straight edges first on the top and the bottom, and then I deal with the curves last, and I deal with the sharp curve on the bottom at the very, very end. All right, there we go. We got it clipped. There we go. All right, you're gonna want a thicker needle. The pattern suggests a 100 by 16 needle. I'm using a 90-14 needle. You're gonna want a thick needle here. We're gonna sew this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So you're gonna wanna go slow. I think I'm gonna sew it with the gusset side up, so the bottom panel side down. It's gonna make it a little tricky, but I think that was easier than sewing it this way. So go slow, just go slow, that's all. It doesn't have to be perfect. If we get any pleats, we can fix them section by section. Just go as slow as you can and use your stiletto or a seam ripper, something to help you hold these pieces in place as they go under the needle. Okay, I know that's hard. The next part's harder, but I know that's hard. And if you did that, you can do the next part. So let's just flip this out real quick and take a look and see if there's any areas we need to fix. So I'll be honest, I am pretty okay with a little bit of pleating. I am not a perfectionist when it comes to any of this. So for example, down here on these corners, I mean, there's like the tiniest pleat right here in the corner. I could unpick that and then redo just this corner to smooth it out. It doesn't bother me that much. And I don't think anybody who is going to get this bag is going to be bothered by it or find it noticeable. So I'm okay with it. Look how cute that is. Oh my gosh. Dang. Okay, so before we attach the binding, what I like to do is go over that seam one more time, especially if you're using vinyl. So it's going to make sure that when your seams are kind of bursting at the seams, the threads aren't shown. Also, it's going to allow you to smooth out any area. So you might notice that as you're sewing this, you kind of lose control for a second and get it back under control, and you have like some jagged seams. Doing a second go around is going to be a lot easier than it was the first time. And it's going to allow you to smooth out any of those little areas where you lost control. And then you just have a nice, perfect, smooth stitch. So let's go over this one more time. Okay, so before we attach the binding to this edge, I like to trim down any part of the seam that's just a little too beefy. So I do make my binding pretty big. I think you need to, but for example, these corners down here, sometimes my material shifts, and so one is a little bit bigger than the other, so I'll just trim that down. Where I have this really thick seam, I'll trim that down just a little bit. I'm not trimming down my entire seam allowance, just areas where it's a little wonky. Okay, now let's do the binding. So I'm going to grab my strip of waterproof canvas, and I'm just going to wrap it so that the wrong side just goes right around that seam. See? Just like that. And that's what it looks like. I don't double fold it. I don't worry about the raw edges of the waterproof canvas. I just wrap it around the seam. And it's nice and big. It's 1 inch thick. So I am going to just wrap this around the seam. And where I have these tight corners, my binding gets pleated. That's fine. If the binding is pleated, you're never going to notice that. You're never going to notice that. So don't even worry about the binding being really straight. See what I mean? I don't know if you can see that, but right here, there's quite a bit of pleating. That's just going to fold over itself. So I'm just going to go around the entire edge that we just sewed, wrapping my binding around it. My goal here is for us to not see the stitching that we made when we attached all these things. So we have a lot of stitching here. My goal is to have the binding hide all that. All right, once I get about this far, I let my binding go over about 1 inch. So it would overlap where I started by about 1 inch, maybe a little bit more. And then I just trim it down. And I'm not going to tuck this part in yet. I'm going to wait until I get to the sewing machine after this is stitched on. And then as I get to this part, I'll wrap it around and stitch it in place. So now when I'm at the sewing machine, I'm going to sew this with the gusset side up and just go around the whole binding. And I sew pretty much right down the center of the binding. Now, if you want it to, you should sew it closer to the raw edge over here. But I find when I do that, I don't always catch the binding on the back. And so to prevent that, I just sew right down the middle. And it's fine. It's fine. Okay, after you get done with that, go around and check the back and make sure you caught all the edges of the binding, and that looks pretty good. If you really want this to look clean, use a thread color that's the same color as your binding, and you won't notice your wavy stitches. But yeah, that looks awesome. That looks very, very awesome. And it provides like a skeleton for the bag. It's very firm, which makes the next step a little bit trickier. So for this next step, grab your back panel, make sure your rings are down, and lay it right side up. Now take the panel you just made, and we're gonna lay it right side down, lining side up, and the lining side of your gusset should be up, so your exterior side of gusset that hasn't been sewn on yet is down against the exterior of the back panel. And line up those midpoint marks on the top edge, and then line up the midpoint marks on the bottom edge. And you might want to flip this over just like that to make it a little bit easier. And just like we did with the other side, let's clip this together, starting with the flat edges first, and then working on those curves. All right, we got this clipped, and we're gonna do the sewing just like we did before. We're gonna sew with the gusset side up. Now here's the thing, this is very structured, which means it's hard to push it out of the way when you're sewing. Now, I do think this is going to be a lot easier than the previous bag I made. The previous bag I made, I used very stiff material, and it was almost impossible to move this out of the way to get to this seam. I think using looser material is going to work in my favor. We'll see, but we're gonna go around this clipped edge now and sew at a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, just like we did on the front. Alright, we got that side attached. I will say it was definitely easier. It was easier than it was for me on my first bag, where I used the vinyl and the waterproof canvas. This was a lot easier. But I do feel like I might have a couple areas I need to fix. Let me just see. Alright, so here's the back. Take a look. The top looks good. I don't see anything crazy there. That looks good. I got a little bit of pleating again on the bottom corner here, but you know what? It does not bother me even a little bit. Look how cute. Doesn't this look like so vintage? Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Adorable. Okay, so I'm gonna flip it back, lining side out. So now that I know that I'm happy with that stitching, what I'm gonna do is just go around a second time, right on top or just outside, just towards the seam of the stitching, just to really reinforce it. We have a lot pushed against this, so I'm gonna do that real quick, and then I'll trim down the sides. Okay, so now once again, I'm just going to trim around the areas that are a little bit thicker, like the corners. Those seams get a little bit bigger than I want them to be. So I'll just trim around them. In any area where I kind of got a little wild with my seam allowance. So once again, I'm just taking that waterproof canvas and wrapping it around the binding. And then on these corners here, if it folds over itself, if it pleats, it doesn't matter to me how that looks. Now, if it does matter to you, that's perfectly fine. And that's where the biased double fold binding is probably going to be your best bet, because the biased binding will have a stretch to it. So you can kind of stretch it around those curves without having too many pleats. And once again, I'm just going to cut this so it extends about an inch and a half over, but I'm not going to trim that section off just yet. And now, once again, I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to stitch right down the middle. I'm not getting that close to the left edge over here because I don't want to miss it on the back, and I'm just going to go around the entire binding, and then once I get towards this end over here, I'll just wrap it around where I started and finish it off. Alright, there we go. And I gotta be honest, I mean, it looks as nice on the inside as it does on the outside. Like, this is just a really beautiful professional look. Okay, so now let's turn it out Check that out. Isn't that adorable? Let's zip it up. Wow. That is so cute, isn't it? All right, now all we have to do is install the top straps. Okay, to install these straps, we're pretty much just going to wrap them around the rectangle rings and rivet them in place. So if you wanted to get real fancy, you could use some of these strap ends here, attach that, and then install it. So I'll show you. If you attached it like that, ooh, and then riveted, and that would look really fancy. Do I want to do that? I don't know. Yeah, we can go ahead and try that. We can go ahead and add these little strap ends on here. So in order to beef up these ends of my strap a little bit, since this is such a big opening on the strap end, I'm just going to fold it down in half by about 1/4 inch. And that way, when I attach this, I have a little bit more, you know, stuff to put this through. So now I am just going to slide this over the end of my folded strap here. And I'm going to poke a hole using my awl or stiletto, something sharp and pointy. You want to get a hole where those holes are so it's easier for your screws to go in. So I have these tiny little screws here. Grab one of them with my screwdriver and I'm just going to screw it in. And it's screwing into the strap end and through the fabric. If it twists out of the way, just make sure you put it back in there. I'm gonna do the second screw just like that as well. And if you'd like, you could add a little bit of glue in here to help it stay. There we go. That just gives kind of a professional look to the end of your strap. And then when we fold this, it's not going to be that noticeable, but it's going to look better than raw edges. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all 4 edges of my straps. All right, so now I have those fancy little strap ends on there. So I'm going to take my strap and I'm going to insert it into my rectangle ring. And then I'm going to fold that end wrong sides together. And I need to lift up this strap so that I have enough room here to put 2 little rivets. All right, so that looks good. So I'm just going to add a couple clips to hold it in place while I do the other side as well. So do your best to keep your strap straight. So I have the folded part of the handle going towards the outside. So the side that has the double folded seams, that's going towards the center of the bag, towards the zipper. So I'm just going to fold this other end around that rectangle ring and try to bring it up the same amount. All right, so there's one strap. So now I'm going to just rivet this in place. So you can measure this to get your rivets exactly where you want them. I'm just going to eyeball it, and I'm going to do it from the back since that's where I have the most stuff and that's where I need to make sure I don't accidentally hit anything. So I'm just going to mark 2 dots that are centered and separated just a bit, just like that. And that's going to be where I put my rivets. It's going to be the same on the other strap. So I'm just going to grab my hole punch, and now I can just punch out these holes. Just doing my best to keep the bag out of the way and everything straight. You don't want to accidentally punch a hole through your zipper. That would be terrible. Okay, and just to hold it together, I'm going to snap a couple rivets in there. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the other strap. Do your best to keep all this straight. I know it's kind of hard because it's cramped. All right, so once you have those in there, you can just set them. I know a couple of mine are a little too close together. That's fine. And that is what the strap will look like. So just go ahead and repeat that with your other strap. All right, there we go. Now both of the straps are installed. That looks so cute. Now let's grab the crossbody strap and just clip that on the side. And there you go. You know what? These D-rings, if you wanted to on the strap right here, you could add 1 rivet just to hold it a little bit tighter because it is kind of a big space for our ring since we didn't use a grommet. So I probably will add 1 rivet on each of these strap connectors over here. But other than that, this bag is looking pretty good. Alrighty, are you ready to see the final product? Oh my goodness. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it so much. This is such a cheerful, cheerful bag. And let me tell you, I didn't use the really thick stuff for this bag, right? I didn't use the really tough vinyl or the waterproof canvas for the lining. So I used the waterproof canvas for the exterior, quilt cotton for the exterior, quilt cotton for the lining. I didn't use really expensive material. You know, waterproof canvas is very inexpensive. You don't need a whole lot of material for the accents on the exterior of the bag. Get an inexpensive lining material. You don't have to spend a lot of money to make these bags. That's what I'm trying to say. You don't have to invest a lot to have a bag that looks like it's worth a lot, because it is worth a lot. This is a really beautiful bag. This would be a very, very beautiful boutique bag. I did have a little bit of extra fun by adding those strap ends up here, which I am really excited about. I'm glad we did that. I think that little bit of bling really shows off how fancy this bag is. I just love it so much. Isn't that fun? So let's look at these bags side by side. Here we go. See? Same exact pattern. I can't get them up the same height. Same exact pattern, same exact size. Both look very professional. Both look, I mean, just like something you'd find in a boutique. They're amazing. I love this pattern. I love this pattern so much. Oh, I keep thinking about different fabric I want to use and different like waterproof canvas and vinyl combinations I want to use to make more of these bags. So once again, thank you so much to Country Cow Designs for allowing us to film this tutorial today. I had so much fun making these. I hope you love making them as much as I do. If you do make one of these bags and you share it on social media, please make sure you tag me. Make sure you tag Country Cow Designs as well. We want to see what you're making. I want to see how it comes together. And I especially want to know if you make it for someone else, who you making it for? Because I'm always thinking of like, who is this good for? And the college student is always on my mind because I spent too much time in college. I spent way too much time in university. And so I always think about how could we use it in college. But I know new moms, this is a great bag as well, because I know as new moms, a lot of times we think baby bags, big bags, all the stuff. And I'm just telling you, I had the big baby bag with all the stuff, and I have the crick in my neck to prove it. I didn't always need all that stuff. So again, this is a great mom bag, teacher bag. Oh, this would be a great teacher bag. They can put their planners in it, their notebooks. It's just big enough to hold all that. You can make it really fun like this. Oh, I might have to give this to a teacher, actually. I might have to gift this one. We'll see. We'll see. So I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.